Previously on the Crypto Wars. To close that open loop, what is going on with Bitcoin?
This changes day to day. So what I say right now is probably not going to be the same a week from now, definitely not 2 weeks from now. But over the last couple of years, there's been a big debate on the best way to scale Bitcoin, to make sure that the network can support the greatest number of users. And that's divided into two main camps. And that's what's made it a propaganda war. And both sides, have accused the other of paralyzing Bitcoin by not changing it or blocking their idea. And that's just because those sides have a slight advantage to be gained if they can convince some stakeholders on the other side. So, before you pull the trigger and are actually running your experiment in the real world, it's an influence game. And people have been playing it, and it's been messy. It's very difficult to imagine that these are like adults with jobs who are ostensibly stewards of this $40 billion store of value. It's actually become quite childish because there's so much antagonism on both sides. People now are threatening. They're like, well, I'm going to take all my Bitcoin cash and sell it for Bitcoin to try to crash Bitcoin. Or I'm going to take all my Bitcoin and sell it for Bitcoin cash to try to crash the other,
Wow, that is childish.
Well, yeah. But at the same time, it's a bark and bite thing, right? You have something to gain if you can convince people that you'll act that way. At the same time, there are some whales in Bitcoin and some very politically aligned whales, one side or the other. And what could it do if somebody sells, 100,000 Bitcoin just for Bitcoin cash, some freely traded exchange, and doesn't give a shit that they're losing potentially a lot of money because they have some political or irrational reason that they want to do that. And is there a diplomatic edge to be gained by convincing people, maybe you're just that crazy, I'm going to do it? Even then, it's pretty complicated because you don't know how the network's going to shake out. Maybe one of those forks will have a technical problem. Maybe it'll disappear. It's also money and humans, so the solution might not necessarily work or be the one that wins out because people just say, yeah, it's not for me. The fundamental issue with Bitcoin is that it's an empirical system. People have theories and ideas about how it can be optimized or how it can be improved. And what people say about Bitcoin is Bitcoin doesn't really care about people's ideas or their theories. It's this sort of emergent thing that will chew up and spit out any ideas that don't actually work with the stakeholders. So you see it on the human level, and it looks like a bunch of people arguing and posturing. But in reality, Bitcoin is an open source software. Anybody could change it. But the more people who are attempting to change it and actually test it in the real world, the more likely you are to have a sort of emergent leader. Market mechanisms will be deciding what the best idea is, not somebody who everybody thinks, oh, this guy's a genius. The problem is beyond the scope of human knowability if you're not actually testing it and running experiments. So both sides and camps have been sort of marshaling their resources and waiting for the best time to run their experiment, which is worrying on one side. If you own Bitcoin and you're like, oh, this might be bad, but I'm actually quite excited about it because I don't think people are smart enough to know which solution is better, and you need to subject it to those types of market forces. So it's an exciting show, but it finally will be a show. People have just been posturing and threatening for such a long time. And now you do finally have these solutions will exist in the wild, and maybe one or both, could be stillborn or go nowhere. One will take over, or maybe one will end up, 20% or so of the market cap of the other. But August 1st, one group has said, hey, we're forking off. So after August 1st, that SegWit chain should be locked in, should be happening to Bitcoin as a scaling solution. So you'll actually have this real live experiment in the wild of these two software protocols working and these two tokens on tradable exchanges. And the market will determine which one it likes the best.
And now, the aftermath. All right, we're back with Joey from bitesofman.com. We left off on somewhat of a cliffhanger in the last episode. For listeners, it's only been a few minutes. For us, it's been a week, and a lot of shit happened in that time. So, Joey, welcome back.
Hey.
We went forward with the fork. That happened, and the universe didn't implode, but things happen. So what happened? I guess catch us up to speed here.
Right. So a currency called Bitcoin Cash is a hard fork of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And they've gone their own way with some protocol changes. So they said, we're going to have a larger block size, just a different philosophy about scaling. We don't need to get into all of it. And it's currently operational. You know, there's some issues with how many people are going to be mining it, how popular it's going to be, what the market price is going to be. But it does exist right now. It is working, and there is a market price. So now it's in the world of empirical reality and testing, and not somebody's idea or somebody's fear or somebody's best looking theory. It's out there, and it's up to the market to decide.
Mm. What I heard that there was something like in the initial day, there was some kind of weird, like it wasn't happening as fast as they thought because I guess not as many miners were jumping on board.
Yeah, so that's part of the incentives. I wouldn't say it's sorted itself out. I'd say it's sorting itself out.
Yeah, okay.
Looking at the price chart right now, it's been very volatile. So what happens if you do a fork off of Bitcoin like this is Bitcoin has a very high difficulty. And if you're not going to get 100% of people mining Bitcoin switch to your fork, it's going to take much longer to find the block. And exactly that happened. Now, there are some provisions in the code that help adjust the difficulty, make it easier to find blocks depending on how many people are choosing to mine it. But that takes a while to roll out, and it's sort of arbitrary how they decide to handle that. So right now, you are seeing the incentives play off where some miners are choosing to mine Bitcoin Cash and some are not. The thing is with mining, it's a real world commitment. You have a warehouse somewhere of expensive to run. Really, they're like servers. I mean, they're not like servers, but they use a lot of electricity. Mm-hmm. The daily electricity bill of the Bitcoin network is somewhere between $1 and $2 million US, and they're expensive. And you can only mine Bitcoin with them right now. Although, well, now you can mine Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So previously, there wasn't really another potentially profitable thing to point a Bitcoin miner at. And now there's this opportunity for these miners to speculate if they think Bitcoin Cash will be worth more in the future, or if the difficulty becomes easier, maybe it's worth doing right now. At the same time, there's an opportunity cost, because if you have a Bitcoin miner and you're mining Bitcoin Cash, you're not mining Heritage Bitcoin. If you're mining Heritage Bitcoin, BTC, you're not mining Bitcoin Cash. So it's back to sort of real world economics and how the market's going to sort this out. And right now, it's more profitable just from a market price stance to be mining Heritage Bitcoin. So, I mean, that's $2,850 or so today, and US dollars, $2,850, and Bitcoin Cash, $290. So a little over 10%. Bitcoin Cash has also been all over the place. It was at 100, it went up to 800, it went down to 400, it held 400 for almost a day, and then it's been down, I think, to the 260s today. And there's so much in that price because a lot of people who want to sell Bitcoin Cash haven't been able to effectively split it out of their wallets yet. And potentially a lot of people want to buy, can't yet, but it's harder to say. Nobody really knows. I'd give it a couple of weeks until that settles out. But then even then, you might get this whole new dimension of currency wars. And you already have propaganda wars. There's been propaganda wars on like Twitter and like the Bitcoin subreddits. And for me about that, it's like, well, what's the incentive? If you're trying to get people to behave a certain way, maybe you have an incentive to try to spread certain ideas. And right now, you're sort of seeing that from both sides, the way you always do. But ultimately, it's going to be decided by what people do with their miners, with their hash power, with their money, right? Where these opportunity costs come in. So it's really just a more credible alternative in being, I guess, sort of like I call it a fork in being, or like the naval terminology of fleet in being. Now this alternative exists. Anybody with a miner could just flip a switch and be mining this other thing. So I think it's a market competition check on the development team of Bitcoin.
Okay. And so there was a lot of interesting stuff there. And I think for one, as far as whether or not it was more or less profitable, and this is getting a bit into the weeds, but I asked because comically enough, I am one of the few people who actually did end up with a Butterfly Labs miner. Yep. And it sat in a rack and just did its thing for years until the power supply died. And I At that time, it had gotten to the point where I wasn't getting deposits, but maybe every 4 months. So it was almost just not even worth it to replace the power supply in the thing. So I
Right.
guess from that standpoint, because I do know that there are a few people listening to this show that have been playing around with miners and stuff like that, and they're curious, like, well, there was so much competition coming in and so much GPU power coming in to Bitcoin that little miners, like, it was almost useless to just be there.
Right.
So is there a difference, even though there's a huge disparity in market value? Is it in purely a quantity discussion? Is it easier? Would it be easier for those miners that kind of just gave up on Bitcoin to go into Bitcoin Cash?
Uh, Easier, yes, but probably still a bad idea. The hash
Okay.
rate of Bitcoin Cash isn't really observable yet, since most of the tools and websites that follow this, and maybe I'm totally wrong, maybe somebody has a good guess. We know it's dramatically lower than Bitcoin, but it's still quite high. If you're trying to mine it without an ASIC, a dedicated machine, you're still not going to have any luck. Right now, part of that's because difficulty hasn't fallen that much. It's fallen a lot. Great, you'd say, except the difficulty on Bitcoin was like 900 billion, which again, that's just a giant number. It means that's how many times harder it is now than it was when it started. It also means you need a $2,000 machine to cover the cost of your electricity to mine Bitcoin. So now, yeah, great. It's 75% easier to mine Bitcoin Cash. You probably still need a $500 machine. Maybe an old Bitcoin miner would do it, maybe not. And today you're still speculating because the difficulty is still high. They're not finding a lot of blocks. Not a lot of people are mining it, and the price is lower. So maybe if the difficulty keeps going down, an older miner or worse miner would be viable. But if the difficulty really gets that low on Bitcoin Cash, that probably means it's failing for other market reasons. And now you have a whole nother dimension of not really wanting to point your miner at it. So I I would just blanket, if you don't want to dedicate at least 4 or 5 machines in a room of your house to mining cryptocurrency, just don't worry about it.
So when you say 4 or 5 machines, are you saying 4 or 5 conventional machines or 4 or 5 of the GPU machines?
Specifically engineered, designed in China, ordered as soon as possible.
I gotcha.
Machines. And then even then, there's so much going on with how difficulty changes and the opportunity cost. You're going to have to worry about the heating or the AC bill of your house. These things they throw off a lot of heat. They're very loud. It sounds like you're just running a vacuum cleaner all the time.
Yeah. Yes,
And
it
they don't
does.
help themselves either. Like they break down. You'll have to be there. You'll have to be monitoring the temperatures. If you're married, you'll have to probably just not do this. So there's lots of risk factors, and even if you do it all, the returns probably nothing to be excited about unless you actually have a warehouse of these things. Most of the competitive miners today in Bitcoin land, and you can go on YouTube and find like these mines, and people are going tours and walking through this. It is a warehouse, right? It's probably at least a couple $1 million investment. Like you're talking about server racks and power supplies and a team of people, on ships that are maintaining these things. And if the difficulty changes, you might have to scrap all of your equipment every 2 or 3 months and replace it. Wow. You have to have pretty sophisticated accounting systems for that to still be profitable. It's currently, it's not a great thing to get into. It's very interesting to follow. Yeah. I encourage hobby mining. Again, if you can afford to just have a vacuum cleaner running all the time in your home, don't do it for too long. You'll figure out a lot about how it works, but it's certainly not going to make you any money. If you really want to make money mining, you can do it with some of the altcoins, but that's a whole nother discussion. And I would, that's its own rabbit hole and maybe a 5-hour podcast. So,
All right, fair enough. So what do you think is going on? I mean, I'm sure that there's a lot of factors in play, but why do you think the Bitcoin Cash has been so volatile as far as the price? Because I know like it started off like around 200, at least the first day when I looked at it, and then it a day or two ago it spiked to 700, and I think when I looked a few minutes ago it was down to 233.
There's so many derivatives on that. Like right now, it's not even really trading. People are just buying and selling claims on Bitcoin Cash because blocks aren't being found very often.
Okay.
Not all these trades are settling immediately. And then you'll even see, people have been looking at the price chart, comparing it to when blocks are found. There will be noticeable price movement. And then it's also a factor, a lot of people who want to potentially sell all of their Bitcoin Cash or maybe just waiting for the wallet software to be tested so that they can split their currencies apart and only sell what they want to sell. And also, you gain something by sitting on the sidelines and seeing what's this price going to do. That said, the volumes haven't been trivial. Like, a lot of people have been buying and selling this product. You can go on the exchanges, you can see the graphs. Kraken is probably the most prominent exchange for United States citizens that's trading this currency pair right now. And you can go see their volume on the internet and see how many real humans are buying and selling this thing. But when you look at the settlement delays, all of the uncertainty, people not really being able to split their Bitcoin yet, like, I haven't even tried. I know that there's products out there that can do this, but I'm personally going to wait, I'd say, at least 6 months. I think November is going to be a more interesting time period to see what happens with the split.
Uh-huh.
But it's an actual currency war in the sense that it's not just rhetoric. People can vote with their money and how they spend things. I said people can vote with their hash power if you have a lot of mining equipment or if you buy mining equipment. But if you have 100 Bitcoin before this fork and the fork happens, now you have 100 Bitcoin and 100 Bitcoin Cash. If you really hate Bitcoin Cash, you can just sell all of that as soon as you want to. And that gets interesting because there's so many whales in cryptocurrency land. What if you're one of these guys who has like 100,000 Bitcoin and now you have 100,000 Bitcoin and 100,000 Bitcoin Cash, and maybe you really hate Bitcoin Cash or you really love Bitcoin Cash? I mean, you're talking about gobbling up entire order books, regardless of what this volume is. The volume, it's not like it's Amazon volume. It's not like it's ExxonMobil volume. It's still relatively thinly traded compared to normal assets that people are used to. So we'll see some sparks fly, I think.
Okay. So were you saying that you were just going to hold off doing anything as far as like splitting it within a wallet or anything for 6 months?
Yeah.
That was your personal take on it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of it existing just because I think it's a great empirical free market check on development teams of Bitcoin in general. So I don't have any ideological reason to sell all of it as soon as possible. Most of the people you see on the internet talking about how excited they are to sell it off, well, why are you talking about that? That's a political ideology. If you really wanted to make a profit out of that, you wouldn't say that to everybody because now you're just forcing the price down. But if you want it to fail for other reasons, maybe because you believe more in your other Bitcoin investment, well, that's a compelling incentive to go out there on the internet and say that. But again, tweets are cheap. What's expensive is actually splitting your Bitcoin out and doing something with it, like selling it at what might be a lower price than you could expect in the future, or holding on to it, or who knows. So, and it's also just technically challenging to split it out. Like, I've told most of my friends that I've gotten into Bitcoin, just don't touch it. And if you really need to spend some Bitcoin, like, send me a message and I'll tell you what to do. But right now, like, there's a couple of wallets that do it, but even the wallets that do it have only been tested for like 3 days now, right? So nobody really knows. Like, some bug might come up and somebody might have lost like $100,000, and I just don't want to mess with that. So I'll wait until solution's been used for months by thousands of people at least, and I'll probably wait longer than that just because I think towards the end of this year, Bitcoin Cash will have a lot of other major epical events in terms of Bitcoin development.
And there is another event coming up. What is that next event?
I think the next biggest one is in November, and that's when this grand compromise that was supposed to stop any of these hard forks from happening, called the New York Agreement, or SegWit 2X. That agreement was that SegWit would be rolled in August, and that's happening sometime in the next couple of weeks. And again, forgive me if I'm getting some of the technical details wrong about that. Only on Bitcoin, not on Bitcoin Cash, which isn't doing SegWit. And then per this New York agreement, in November, there is supposed to be a hard fork to 2 meg on Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
With SegWit chain. Now, the core development team of Bitcoin has been saying that a hard fork is impossible and too risky and would take at least a year and a half of work for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's a little embarrassing now that these, Bitcoin Cash has just come along and said, "Oh, you mean this hard fork? Like this is how you would do it?" And then just it's working and operating in the world.
Uh-huh.
I might be really embarrassed soon. Like, who knows? Maybe it's not going to be working in a week, and then you're going to have everybody on Bitcoin saying, "Say, we told you." But
yeah.
For now, it is working, and it's making most of the partisans on the no hard fork, no matter what side, look like that. Like they had a political reason for having that stance and not actually a technical reason. The problem now, you get to November, nobody I say nobody, but a lot of people who agreed to this SegWit 2x thing didn't really want it. They just thought it would be worth it to prevent a hard fork. Now that a hard fork happened anyway, which again, nobody's in charge of Bitcoin, anybody can fork it. It just happens to have been forked in a compelling way that the market seems to recognize as worth something. That's the perfect casus belli for people who wanted to keep SegWit with no fork. They'll say, look, this already happened. We're not going to do this side of the agreement. But then if that happens, that's also the perfect casus belli for the people who didn't like the SegWit part to say, hey, like you were lying the whole time. So that's when I think you might really see some sparks fly around Bitcoin Cash in November. If the current core development team says, hey, look, there's already this other hard fork. We're just not going to hard fork this SegWit chain. We're just doing something else. What's that going to do? Or maybe some people hold on to the New York agreement for dear life, and now you have 3 forks because you have Bitcoin Cash forked in August, then you get to November, and then SegWit 2x forks because half of them say, screw you, we're keeping just SegWit, and half of them say, no, we had this deal, like we all agreed to it. Now you might have 3 forks. And if you don't spend any of the Bitcoin you had before August 1st at all through all of this, you'll just have all 3 of them. But if you spent them, aside from an accounting nightmare and a technical nightmare and what's going to happen to the market price nightmare, there's a lot going on. So there's a lot of downsides for Bitcoin. Obviously, like if you're just a user and a person, you're like, what the hell is this money? Why would I use any money that this happens to? And my answer to that is, well, the Federal Reserve does way worse things all the time. All of this stuff is totally transparent. Anybody can see what's happening. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass to learn about, but it is out there in the open, and anybody can study and learn and pick and choose and do what they want with it. So I think November is going to be a key date.
Okay. We'll have to have you back as we get closer to that date.
BitCoin.com has already put a public service announcement on our website, and it just says straight up, or our CEO, Roger Ver, has said, hey, if SegWit 2x doesn't happen in November, we will be putting 100% of our resources behind Bitcoin Cash.
Oh, wow.
So there's already, these camps lining up, and we'll see, how those incentives really will align in November.
That's pretty crazy. So is it okay for people to spend their Bitcoin right now?
Yes, but I'd say if you're getting into Bitcoin and you just get on Coinbase and buy Bitcoin, you've just bought Bitcoin. There's no Bitcoin Cash in it. You can use it like you use Bitcoin. If you had Bitcoin before August 1st, now you have both. And you need to research and find a wallet that will split them for you. The ones that do it right now are Ledger. That's the one that sort of the internet chorus is saying does it the best, most reliably. I believe Electrum Desktop does it as well, but don't take my word for it. Like before you try to spend Bitcoin that you've held since before August 1st, do some internet research and figure out the best wallet. Even by the time this airs, maybe in a couple of days, there might be a clear contender. And what you'll do is you'll just load up your wallet, or you'll send a Bitcoin transaction to the splitting service, and you'll receive back Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. And then you'll spend either one of those, however you want to do it. So, unfortunately, it's a pain in the ass. And it's also really risky. So no matter what you do, I would send a small amount, like figure out what solution you want to use. Google how to split Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, do your own due diligence, and then test it with like $20. And at that point, then do what you want. But again, like any significant amount, even if you just have one Bitcoin, that was $2,800 before the fork. And then after the fork, that was $2,800 of Bitcoin plus $300 of Bitcoin Cash, right? Mm-hmm. So really, for the first time ever, the price of Bitcoin was more than $3,000 per unit of BTC after the fork. So you did have a market appreciation for, hey, now we're serving more customers in a better way. Like we've created more value than there was here before. It's more silver investing today as well.
Oh, nice.
Just as a break.
Yeah.
All of this nonsense. But it's interesting. I mean, it's a real currency war, and there's propaganda. It's just that the propaganda now is open source. There's no government monopoly on the propaganda. There's no government monopoly on the currency, and it's all going to be up to free market participants and seeing what they think is going to pan out.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. Well, thanks again, dude.
Yep. Have a good one.
Keep up with Bitcoin and Joey through bitesofman.com. Again, that's bitesofman.com. This is a bonus episode So, show notes, links, and resources can be found at intherabbithole.com/E220, along with the season premiere. With that, we wrap up bonus episode number 220 from the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.